Okay, we're going to do the banner exercise now. By the way, if you hear some banging or strange noises, my heater has been pinging and making noises, so that's what that is. So we're going to, this is going to be one of those where you follow along with me, and there's maybe not a lot of original work, but I do think it's useful work because you may very well want to use a banner on your resume. If you've wanted to use some kind of special type in your H1, maybe something unusual or maybe something like a script, for instance, or something like that, then you really have two choices, right? You would either have to use it as an image or use a web font. You can read in your text about web fonts, and you can go look at web fonts. This is going the direction of making it into an image, kind of like an art banner that sits on the top of your page. We'll make two of them, one with just text, and then we'll add a gradient to make it look a little bit different. And we're going to do it in two different programs, right? So that's one of the issues we have here is, do you have Photoshop, access to Photoshop? If so, you should use it probably. And you will get to see me struggle with Photoshop in a moment, which is not the program I have the most, I'm not the most familiar with. On the other hand, if you don't, then maybe you want to use Pixlr, and I'll do this with Pixlr too in a moment. Either is fine, or if you have any other program you prefer, you want to convert this exercise and use the program you like, okay, good. Have you ever had the opportunity to use a program called Fireworks, which is actually available here in Ward Hall? It's an older web graphic making tool which is owned by Adobe, which they kind of have left behind a little bit, but I don't think it's actually updated in the new Creative Cloud. So may or may not be available to you. But Fireworks is actually made for this sort of thing. But we won't use it because it'll be hard for you to find a copy. So there is some other work to do. There's not much HTML work, just a little bit, but it is interesting and should be useful to you. In any case, make a project folder, make a root folder, and then download the two HTML files, which we'll get to eventually, and we're going to make two PNG files. I'm going to start with Photoshop, and then I'll move on to Pixlr. And again, please excuse any pauses I have to do as I try to remember some of the Photoshop commands. Also, they made some changes to this program in the version I'm using, and that may or may not be exactly like your version, but I'm sure you can work it out. So here I have Photoshop up, okay? And I've done this already to try to remember what the heck I was doing on this. So some of my stuff may already be kind of set the way that you're going to want to set yours. So I'll go. So you may need to pause and make some changes yourself. We're going to go File, New, and these actually are the things the proportions you want, the numbers you want. 960, 150, and please make sure these are pixels, not inches. Pixels makes a big difference. 72 is probably what you have already. That's RGB is fine, but it's very important you have a transparent background. And then you can ignore these things and give it a name. I'm going to use the name. This may be a little different naming than what you have. I'm going to make it text. I'm going to call it photo for Photoshop, so I can keep this one straight from the other one. Okay, good. And I'll just say OK. And this makes an extremely horizontal block. I use those numbers because they're nice proportions for a banner, and 960 pixels is a common size for something that's full width of the page, probably. Let's get some text going here. So I have the text tool selected. You probably start with the regular selection tool, go to the text tool, which is down here somewhere in your program. Okay. And now what are you going to choose? Well, set it at least at 72, and we're probably going to go, we certainly are going to go bigger than that. I think you could set the color now or later. I'm going to choose a color right now. And I think you should pick something that be an interesting color, but relatively dark, because we'll make the gradient relatively light. And if you're doing this in the future for your own resume, you can, of course, choose any color that makes sense. You're looking for a color that makes sense in your color scheme, right? So I'm going to choose something in this dark greenish sort of color here. And you can, of course, move the slider around to choose some other colors. I'm just going to say, OK, you want to pause now and spend some more time with the color? Fine. I'm going to just start typing. I'm going to type my full name. I'm doing mine upper and lowercase, and I'll select the whole thing. cursor doesn't want to work. Okay, and I'm going to make it a lot bigger. I'm going to make it like 150. That's probably not a choice from you. You probably have to type 150 in there. You could try 200. Now the numbers you're going to use are going to depend on the font. You're going to have to be changing these. I'm going to take mine and drag it around someplace so I can see the whole thing. Now I'm going to go in there, and maybe you want to choose a different font. I have this brush thing selected. Now there's no reason really to do this with just a very plain serif or sans serif font. Because if you wanted just a plain serif or sans serif font, you would simply use a font stack, right? And that would be a lot faster and better for everybody. And remember, you don't have to, on your resume, actually use an image. There's nothing wrong with using a font in a font stack. But if you decide you want something special, then pick something special, right? Maybe it's going to be something weird like that one, Algerian, or some other scripty, odd scripty thing like Blackadder. Or go on down through this whole list, take some time, choose what you want. I'm using this brush and this weight here, but you pick what you want, right? Okay, so pause it and come back, and now I assume you've gotten the font you want, and you have it made it roughly big enough to fill up this block with a little space top and bottom and so on. But the problem is we still have a lot of space left and right, so what are we going to do about that? So I'm going to take my piece of text with my selection tool and drag it over here, roughly to the end. It's not perfect to the end, that's okay though. And now I'm going to do Alt-T, which brings up my transforming handles here. And I'm going to grab this handle, I'm going to yank it. So we're really doing some things to the type here that the type designer would not be happy with, but what can you do? He's not around. So I could stretch one way or the other to make it fill this space roughly. I don't want it to be touching the edges. That's okay. Just roughly filled the space. Good. So what else could we do? Well, we could add some effects to it. So I'm going to click off. I'm going to select the layer. I'm going to choose under FX down here in the bottom right. I could choose any of these. It'll bring up all of them as an option. I'm going to choose bevel and emboss, and it'll come up with the menu of all the things I can do, and you can experiment and play with these. But do notice, just by even choosing it, I got some bevel and emboss on it. I can undo the preview, and you can see, and go back again, and that's kind of nice. I might also add some drop shadow a little bit. You can play with these amounts here if you want to have a little bit of shadow behind it, stuff like that. And then I'm going to do file save. Eventually you get what you want, and I do file save as. I want to save this as a PNG. There it is, and I'll leave that size, and I'm not going to put it there. I'm going to put it in week 11 in my, not week 11, in week 12 in my banner thing, and I got some others there already. I forgot about that, but I'm just going to save it anyway. And I'll just say okay. Shouldn't disturb the original. All right, let's make another one now. Let's continue along. Since we're here right now, your instructions talk about going to the HTML next and so on, but we'll just make the two images first. Now, what if we want to do a gradient with this? Okay. All right, good. So I'm going to make a click off here and choose a new layer. And I'll just say, I'll leave it, whatever, this stuff is all fine. I'll say okay. And I'm going to, that layer is on top now, and that's okay. And I'm going to choose my gradient tool, which is down, that's not the gradient tool. There's a gradient tool. The gradient tool. And now I'm going to look at my choices that are up here right now. So I have a lot of gradient choices I can pick from. I can look at those later though too. I'm just going to start by, and these are gradient styles. I'm just going to start by dragging and my cursor along here. See my cursor's turned into a crosshair. I'm just going to make a long drag and make a line here. And I have a gradient. Now that gradient is has to do with some choices I must have made earlier probably. You can go through here and you could choose one of these gradients. Look at, I have under purples and I have You can imagine trying to remember what your font was to begin with. I think the grays might be nice, but actually I want to go with something a little bit brighter. I'm going to go with the blues. I could choose one of these, like that one there, or that one there. That would be fine. Otherwise, I can get more into it myself, trying to make up the gradient itself. Choose my gradient tool. Okay, so I could pick ends of the gradient. I pick different colors here to use with my gradient. But one way or the other, choosing that gradient tool, and I think your best choice is probably going to be to choose one of these pre-made gradients here. You go ahead and work on it, or you can go ahead and go through these other settings and choose other gradients. And again, I'm going to go with that one. Now also the other thing that changes your gradient is the way you draw this line. If I draw a little line up here like that, a little short line, a long line, that changes the gradient. And I can eventually, I could take my layer and put it down below my other layer and start to see how it interacts with the type I have. And that's a little weird, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. You do what you want. Take some time with your gradient. Move the layers around so you can see it. And then eventually choose what you want. And I'm going to save this as, again, a PNG is what you want. And I'm going to call this text, call this GRA for gradient. Photo for Photoshop, and PNG, and say save. Okay. All right. So I made the two images with Photoshop. Now let's go ahead and try it with Pixlr. And here I am in Pixlr. And I'm in Pixlr E, which is the one that you want. And yes, sometimes it can look a little confusing, and the screen can look different times. When I open it up, sometimes it looks different than other times. But what we really just want to do is create new. And we have to give it a name. Be a good time to give it a name. I'm going to call this TXT Pixlr, or just PIX, I guess, instead of photo for Photoshop, PIX for Pixlr. And I'm going to give it those same sizes we talked about with 960. Whoops. And height is 150. It will default to pixels. There's no issue there. We don't have a choice of transparency, but if we don't leave the background turned off as opposed to turn on, that will be transparent, essentially. And we say create. And it's made this nice little thing here, and it's called a layer. It's called layer 1, and we're all set there. Okay, so again, we're going to choose type. And this time we can add the text up here, and automatically sticks it down there. I'm going to type my name. It's red for some reason. I don't know why. I could change that color to something else, a bluey kind of color maybe. I'm going to try for something like kind of like I had last time, a darkish kind of color. But you choose what you want, right? Now we can also choose the font. And again, we're all over the place. These font choices are even weirder. And do you see these little orange things next to some of these fonts in Pixlr? That means it is not available to you unless you buy the premium thing. You go click on one of those, which I do over and over again by accident. Then you have to X out because it wants you to pay money to get that one. So they've saved, of course, the best fonts for, I don't know about the best fonts, but quite a few fonts for people who pay extra money for them, right? So my brush script that I used before, something like it, is actually already there. It's not available to us. I'm not spending money for it. But I'm sure you can find something interesting in here. I might choose a different idea this time than a script. Maybe I'll choose something a bit more decorative. That's actually, that's like a Comic Sans. And you see the sizes change dramatically. Cervantes, Carvino. These are some weird things. I should just go ahead and pick something, and then you can pause this and spend some time picking your own. So I'm going to pause this and come up with something, and then you pause and come up with something yourself. Okay, I chose something called Game On. It's kind of weird. Okay, and I'm going to make the size of this even bigger. Use this slider to go up, but just a little. Don't want to go that big. 76 is probably getting close. Maybe 80. 80 is too much. Actually, if I leave it at 80 and I open up the box a little more, that'll probably do it, right? Okay, 80 fills up pretty good left and right. 85, I'll just slide it a little bit. 86, something like that. I'm actually pretty good as far as the distance left and right in this font. Just happens to be, but I'll show you the next step anyway. So here's the idea: is we want to be able to stretch this guy. Well, actually, first maybe we should do a some styling. Now we don't do the styling over here. Maybe you can, as far as I know, but I know in this program up here under filter. So I want to choose the type itself, and I'll go to filter. That's not right. Click off. Regular selection tool. Filter. Nope. Hold on just a moment. Well, I know what it was. I first needed to rasterize the layer. So I've got this layer selected. Okay. I'm going to go to Layer, Rasterize Layer, which is like turning it into an image. Okay. So now it's rasterized. And now if I go to Filter, I have all these choices here, including perhaps bevel, which that's a pretty wild bevel. My goodness. Pretty extreme size. Maybe just a little bit of beveling on it, and maybe the shadow. I could change these colors around a little bit. I'll apply that. Why not? I could also go to Filter and choose Drop Shadow. I could change the drop shadow maybe to a white drop shadow, and I could also say okay to that. But the offset is really not. It's way too much. I'll bring it up right underneath. I could do other work with any of those things too, and in the end I'm just going to say I'll apply that too. I can also, with this selected, I can let's see, Control Z that. See, my X and my Y and my width and my height are locked right now. If I unlock those, so I'm in a free transform situation, I can now stretch this guy by grabbing the handles to stretch the type to fill my box in a little better. So by rasterizing, choosing under filter, choosing different effects, and then by unchecking the aspect ratio so it becomes free, allows me then to stretch things out to more fully fill the box. And let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to save this as a PNG, and this is called Text Pics still, and I'm going to say download. And remember that goes to my download area, which I'll go look at later. So it's going to finish, and I'm going to close this. Okay, let's do another one. I'm not sure if I had that layer there to begin with. I'm going to delete that layer as if I'm starting with just this first layer. All right, I'm going to make a new layer though, and I'm going to make a new empty layer right there, and I'm going to move that new layer. That layer 3 by its choice automatically is on the top, and that's fine because I would like to use my gradient tool on that layer. So I'm going to click on the gradient tool, and this gives you linear or radial gradients, and then it gives you some gradient colors you're going to pick from. And it gives you lots of choices, weird choices down here, and interesting choices actually. So you just choose one of those if you wish, or you can click down here and click in the color of the gradient. And this, frankly, I didn't get into many details in the gradient in Photoshop. If you clicked on the color in the gradient area in Photoshop, you can get to more of these choices too. So I could choose the starting color. Maybe I don't want red. Maybe I want something that's a bit more pinky. That's going to be weird looking. Make it more light off pink, sort of. That's going to be a little strange. And then I'll change go over here for my next color. Instead of being, I'll say okay. Go my later color and choose that color. Instead of being black, I'm going to turn it to the bluer color, and I'm going to make it a bit like that. And you can go on, and you can change the opacity, make it a little bit less, sort of semi-transparent or something. One way or the other, you get some gradient stuff going on here, and with the gradient tool selected, I can now, down here in my image area, I can grab with my gradient tool, which is right there. Yeah, I can go ahead and start drawing the lines again. Draw a little line, draw a big line. Now, the one reason we're seeing some of it is that it had been kind of semi-transparent at one point. It changed to 100%. You may have done that accidentally. But we don't really mind the fact that we can't see the whole thing, because of course I can just change these image layers around. After working on my gradient, get it the way I want to, and my color, I'm going to save it again. I'm going to save, and again I'm going to save it as a PNG. But this time I'm going to change it to, instead of text, to GRA for gradient for pixeler.png. And I'm going to say, download. It's going to take a moment, and it's going to go down. Okay, I'll leave this here, and I'm going to get those files, those two files, and save them. Get them out of there, and stick them in my banner folder. Okay. So I have actually more than you have in your folder. In my folder I have 4 images. You should only have 2 depending on which program you used. And I actually have those banner 1, banner 2 files, but I'm actually going to be using this banner tut file for both of them. I'm editing that right now, and let me close these other guys up. Okay, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as if you're going to use 2 separate files. I'm just going to use one. So you're going to do one and then do the next one. I'm going to do the same stuff with just this one. So follow the instructions, and first we're going to apply or put in the file the text banner, and then we'll do the gradient one. What does this look like right now? Let's run this. And it's the same file I've been using over and over again. And you see it just has your name here up there. So let's edit this stuff. You should go in the HTML and put your name in here. Put your own name there too. Okay. And you'll see in here I have an area for an IMG, SRC. And here we'll put the text one. I'll show you both of them so we look at the difference. But I said TXT photo. Is that what I called it? Yeah, TXT photo.png. That's the Photoshop one. And you do need to put all text in here. You should write, Jack Downs banner. Something like that. Whatever. That makes sense. So that is sitting there. It's just plain text with there's a lot of shadow on that, isn't there? Wow. Probably too much shadow. But let me look at the other one. And because I'm getting the shadow to almost make it look like it's losing too much of my transparency down here. But I made another one also, right? So I'll show you the one I made just made in Pixeler. And that's called PIX. No, sorry. Text PIX, is that right? Yes. Okay. And that's okay, I guess. I'm going to stick with this one for now. I guess the other one was a little bit too weird to me, but neither one is very good effort. So you would probably, for your real resume, spend a lot more time working on that file. So let's say that's perfect. That's just what I want. It's my style and my color and so on. And I want it to be mostly just text up here. Okay, a couple of things going on. First of all, it's not centered like it's centered, and it says Jack Downs twice. What's going on here? Well, every page needs to have an H1. Remember, every page does need to have an H1. So that's not going to change. But every page also needs, any page that has an image needs to have the image show and not have the H1 show. So what are we going to do? So I'm here in my file, and I see I have something called, I have the H1, right? So we wrote the H1 in, but we have to tell it not to display. So why do we leave the H1 on the page? We leave it there for SEO, right? But we don't want it to display, so now it won't display. Now also notice that I have a div around this thing, right? I have a div around that image. Now I'm going to tell that div, so I'm using the thing called header. not the thing called banner, the thing called header for this example. I want to make it the header, give it a width. We know what the width is. And I'm going to use margins to center it. Remember, we can size, we can center size things with the margin command. And we're going to say that's 0 top bottom auto, right? And for this example, for the first one, this is on your first page. We're not using that banner choice there. Okay. Hey, and it centered it, and it put it, and our H1 is not displaying. Do notice though, if my page gets smaller, gets narrower to a certain point, that's fine. But then at a certain point, because that thing is a hard size, it's going to go off the page. I'm going to get the horizontal scroll bar. So it is not very responsive. But there's nothing wrong with doing something like this on your resume. Okay? Now, let's go move on to page number 2. My HTML is not changing. I'm not bothering to open up the other one. You have to save that first one and then go open up the second file. You have to put your name in the H1 again. You still have to tell the H1 to display none again. We're not going to use this header area here. Okay, we're going to put a different image in now. This one is going to be called GRA. I'll use the Photoshop one. I'm going to save and run it, see what it looks like. Whoops, and I got the name wrong. What did I actually call it? GRA hyphen, I got to give the .png. I need the full name. There it is. That's colorful. It would be an unusual color scheme, well, that would actually fit in, but I'm going to say right now that we think it's perfect. Good. So I'm going to show you another way you can kind of center and make flexible at the same time, responsive at the same time, this image here. Yes, we could size it and use margins to center it, but we have another option. We could go ahead and give it a width of 100%. Let's see what that does. This time I'm going to use the banner. The banner is attaching directly to the IMG. See, the IMG has an ID of banner. I'm going to go to banner and say width 100%. And there it is. It goes to 100% of the width of the page. Now, there's some dangers with that. If you're an extremely big monitor, it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it can only stretch so far. Also, you see it's gotten very deep at the same time. Now, you could attach some maximum and or minimum widths and or heights to this thing, which you can read more about in your textbook. And actually, you're going to see some of this in the Dreamweaver tutorial that you're going to be doing. So that'd be another option too. But in any case, realize that we change the size, the whole thing flexes, both dimensions actually, of course, right? So that is an interesting way to handle a banner. And you could have done the same thing, of course, with just a plain text one. You don't have to have a gradient to use the 100%. It would work either way. Just two different methods. So now you've got the one image on one file, another image on the other file. On one you used sizing and margins of auto. The other one you use just a width to center it, to make it full size essentially. So you should zip up that stuff and be all set.